Attempts to elicit sympathy can trigger some people. So I'd rather you think of this as telling it like it is. We've all been put through a lot over the last decade about playing the victim card because it isn't Trump. I had a fall. I live alone. It took me a while to get up. It wasn't an emergency. It was because the chair tipped over. That's the condition I'm in at age 65 with Parkinson's. Our society has put me in this condition. I'm not a particularly good podcaster. I'm not sure I'm disappointed that Weaponized News decided not to put a plug on my Substack, but I appreciate any audience I may have and their congenial bums. I like them considerably. I am afraid this is going to be a blitherously long video for nothing, but the reason I do these videos, I don't have many visitors, is because it's important minority opinion. And there's a possibility, however remote it might be, that someone may catch on to the idea that there's substantiating material evidence for what I put forward. But there's also certain conceptual gaps in what we're willing to negotiate about our reality because we're forbidden to jump to conclusions. And it's not a good idea to jump to conclusions. But we are dealing with phenomenon like fingerprints that are conspicuous that we have to consider may be real. Weaponized was discussing what they called coordinated social engineering. There's another word for that. It's California government guerrilla theater. And I want to talk a little bit about California government guerrilla theater, but my notes, because of Parkinson's, are very difficult to read. I was in California for a little bit of time, and I'd like to talk to you about a sympathetic, so sympathetic character there. When my stomach was poisoned in Pittsburgh, we had a bank attendant named Wiswell. WIS were the initials of this character back in California. 125 Street, which was how much I got charged to visit Claymont. And he had a ferocious cat. It was more than feral. It was a cougar virtually. It was tearing apart this beautiful domestic house cat. And he was just letting it do it. And I tried to reason with him to get rid of that cat because it was going to kill. And the cat managed to escape it. But this is the so sympathetic character WIS is. And of course, the well suffix stood for Stockwell. Elizabeth Banwell was a newspaper reporter on Bar Harbor. Wiswell was the name of this banker. So you can see that these people were toying with poison crimes. If you allow me to step over here to where my evidence continues over on the other side, I'll retrieve a document that will help you understand this lecture. It's a book of chronology of film. I want you to notice something because you've probably seen the picture of Bibi Netanyahu pointing his lip like this. This is where the disease-looking boil came up on my lip when Gates's crowd poisoned me in the mouth on my return from college. They didn't, even though John Schulman was busted, and I helped navigate the investigation, they didn't forgive me for reporting him in the first place. And the evidence from Mercy Hospital shows you that, remember the one that says two lip, points to the lip, also has COVID on it, and it predates COVID by about 2 years. So we know that these shrinks are cahooters, and they're leaving these fingerprints in my pizzazz. Now, Toon is a phenomenologist. Owen Jones pointed out that he's capable of being a very, very endearing person. I'll give you an example. One day I was sitting, as I was humbly disposed to do in the bleachers at Safeco, watching baseball. I imagined a, a toy that would, remember the snow cone that the Grateful Dead idiot hits himself in the forehead with? I was doing like that. 10 is a minor miracle phenomenology. He really is. They had one of these things waiting for me within the end of the week. There was an ice cream cone with a puffball on it on a string, and you could pop it into space or hammer it into your forehead as you chose. I mean, it's hard not to credit that man's genius. Genie was another example. Caspar Weinberger studied retardation before he became Secretary of Murder for Hitler Reagan. And he took a sabbatical to do it. Well, Genie fused with the neuroplastic comatona and taught me sign language and redeemed me from school. I mean, there was redemption involved in this. Franklin Graham hated humanism. He called us the greatest threat to democracy since communism. Well, they worked the redemption of Genie on poor old me. I think it was cruel and unusual punishment to release AIDS, to castrate me over a virgin. But from a phenomenological point of view, the Hardy he produced was really something else. It was orchestrated with Peter Gabriel. Now, you may feel as I do about it that it shows that Paul McCartney's politics are the most loathsome politics of any human being who's ever strutted the android zone. But they're after bragging rights over Lenin's Houdini, and they're saying, thou shalt not pass. The ballroom has prior symbolisms too. There's a film called Shall We Dance? The clock to 119 minutes. There's a movie called 119 which mirrors the 911 attack. So if you look at the situation in California, Santa Cruz, I believe it was, summer of 1987, you had Drew Wagle, which is like Nancy Drew, and Wagle is like Reagan. And you had Greg Starcynic, Arsenic and Old Lace, Starcynic, Greg Carl, Pope Carl, and Deborah Martin working for David Demrouse with Andrea Swimmer, the Neva Corporation girl, who represented the YWCA. You see, the YWCA doesn't like these refugees from the foreign wars because they have enough homeless women that they're sheltering. So they get the Neva Corporation to make a hullabaloo for the Thomas Merton Center and say that have a boo-hoo for the women who abused me, saying he should pay his fair share to the homeless division, which is passing the hat for the people in the genocide program. Now you wonder, how can you say that? How can you say that? Martha Gellhorn poured out her "How can you say that" routine on me, even though she was defending the people who had have now turned on Gaza ferociously because she saw the liberation of Dachau. In fact, the whole thing with the Beatles comes from the Fiddlers of Sobibor. If you look it up in Google, you'll see that there were violinists who would greet what they called the merchandise and lead them to the gas chambers. So you have, but the whole thing is that it was prior set up. Like Erica Kirk says, or somebody said something at the most recent stage show. There's going to be a lot of shooting tonight. Okay, okay. And then there was some shooting. Saturday Night Live situation. Okay, so it was set up, but you can't prove it. And they had like, they ferociously, they were, Fuzzy Heart is ready for Rapist Peter Gabriel. King Crimson's first album is rape, 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 rape. The rape is their favorite thing. And I recoiled at this and said in horror, you're suggesting I should have raped you. It recoiled in horror. And they said, well, since you did that, we're going to find someone whose name contracts the sharps and stab her with a bagel knife after we make you get rid of your bagel knife. And that's what they did in Seattle, outside the clubhouse, the Shannon Harps. So you have this bizarre phenomenologist with his spinner beanie on, justifying intense interrogation of a neuroplasm through Penis Gabriel's REM circuits, bragging as Sinfield did about his largesse. So, but you could tell it's set up because there was this woman who sang in a great baritone named Donaldo Gilligan. And now they're trying to make hop, skip, and a jump with this Japanese girl because I was writing about the brainwash of James Child, the decision-making processes that went behind the bombing of Hiroshima and the Sunday newspaper. And they set me up with a Japanese girl so that Sean Lennon can jump out of his rabbit hat. Hello, it's me. Guess what? Don't you ever forget, Todd Rundgren style stuff. Well, it's malicious of them to claim that this was not a setup because it was a setup. Donaldo Gilligan is like Donald and Diamanda. Gilligan is like the island. Get it? They're leading the justification system through what Ian Wadmaker called treasure tracks, which is fingerprints, to build the justification for the island so that WIS, W-I-S, can say, we released a feral cat on the pussy ball because he deserved it. But they were setting it up. They had the spirits come and say mouth. So it's bizarre, but it's true. And they used the C and the Star of David for the pornographic insane asylum's claim of copyright. You see, they slash and murder Shannon Harps over the pizzazz of a penny line. And they don't want anybody to tell because that's exploiting John Lennon's mysterious Swami Nostra spirit. And that's how this thing operates. So that is how this thing operates. And there's fingerprints for it. So that's California government's guerrilla theater. And it's, Marslack, who introduced me to Zappa and set me up so that I could interview Peter Gabriel by telling me to ask for Bill Parks at the Stanley Theater. Took me to Quasi at the Quackadura. This is Quasi at the Quackadura treasure tracks from California government guerrilla theater in the abomination that led to Mount Desert Island. And they're just playing Ringo Starr's game about I'm going to beat your brains in until somebody stops me. You remember how he used to be such a crybaby because they walked away peacefully when the Bobbies showed up from their concert on the top of the tippy top of the high rise. And he was, I wish I had stayed in my drum kit and made them pull me away. Well, that's what he's doing to poor Queerball. you're gonna have to pry Ringo Starr's dead hands off my throat for snitching on them, and that's not justified. What they got away with was liberating Gail Burston. Franklin Graham's hatred for humanism phenomenalized on Jimmy Creary's like a solemn vow of revenge for Hiroshima. They implanted a neuroplasm, the enemy within, get it? Edna Ray Galuli changed her name to Linda Burston, like Ellen Burstyn, to Ellen Burstyn, like Gail Burston. Gail Burston, Gail Carolyn, Christmas Carolyn Baumsworth, and it's a homophone for, it's a nom de guerre, homophonic nom de guerre for Christian Zionist Armageddonism. The enemy within, and then they, Diagoras, Diadawas used to talk about scribble on the brain. They scribbled the carrot tape on the brain and phenomenologically impinged it on the persona and then extruded it when Crocagri came around with her linguistic anthropology headset saying, you know, they shared brain cells, and spreading ugly, evil rumors about the psychotic 50s sci-fi thing that George Bush thought up to shade the possibilities of the script about John Lennon on behalf of the girl who appears on Robert Fripp's Garbage in 1979, on behalf of George Bush and his sci-fi team, on behalf of the swastika state run by George Takai and Stephen King and Bill Gates, on behalf of the Pinkertons and so-called alternative media who are a deep state themselves. And you really can't, you know, one of the things that went on in California was a girl named Tanya who did math. Tanya who? No, Tanya who? She was doing net math, right? And a falcon came out when I was walking with her on the plage of Davenport. So Falcon, that's Bobby Kennedy's rap, and he loves Netanyahu, right? So do the math came the Falcon. Do the math with Netanyahu.